In the previous video, we already discussed two types of states, predatory state and developmental state. We said that, from the perspective of the general public, we definitely want to see a developmental state. Okay? That's why here in this video, we're going to introduce or discuss 6 factors which might help us reach a developmental state, or at least to move towards that end. Okay. Now, during this discussion, I would strongly encourage you to apply what we discussed here to the Meiji Restoration, or more specifically, Meiji government. Okay. Anything you already knew from the 2 documentaries and the reading articles or the previous QRL videos. Okay, think about these. And later, during our class meeting, we're gonna discuss these. Okay, all right. 6 factors towards the developmental end. The first one is the initial distribution of wealth. Okay, we believe that if at the beginning of the political development, a country has a relatively even distribution of wealth, in other words, there was no big gap between the rich and the poor, then the country is more likely to end up with or become a developmental state. Okay? The reasoning is pretty simple. If at the beginning or early stage of development, there's a huge gap between the rich and the poor in terms of their income, then we find that the government could easily be controlled or partnered with the rich minority. Okay, so all the public policies made by the government is just for the benefit of the rich minority. Okay, and if that happens, of course, the country is moving towards a predatory state instead of a developmental one. Okay, so initial distribution of wealth matters. The second factor is the tax revenue, mainly from the earned income. Now here, what is earned income? What is unearned income? Okay? For an individual like you and me, earned income means you have to make constant efforts, providing your service or making something, okay, producing some products, so that eventually you can earn the income, you can make money. Okay. Now, again, if for me, like teaching at a college, and I spend hours preparing for the lectures, meeting with you guys constantly, every week, and then spend a lot of time grading your exams, your homeworks, all of these efforts together. That's how I make make money, right? That's how I receive the salary from the school. Or a few years later, when you guys, I believe most of you, after graduation, you are going to work for another company, right? Again, even just, every day you clock in, clock out, these are the efforts, okay? Regardless of your productivity. And because you spend time in the office, right? Or even, make, the efforts go into the office, okay? Or the time and resource you spend commuting, okay? All of these together, again, that's just the example of the earned income. Unearned income, how could we have the income which we, unearned? So, for example, if I have a rich uncle who gives me like $1,000 allowance every month, without asking me to do anything for him, then this is definitely unearned income for me, right? Or in some cases, if the efforts I make and the income I received are disproportionate, then it's also considered as unearned income. For example, I spend $2, from my salary, for example, purchasing a lotto ticket, and I win, $1 million. Okay, and you could say that's, still earned income. For example, I spend several hours doing some research and trying to guess, what numbers are more likely, help me win this time. But again, the efforts I spent, like several hours or $2 I spent purchasing that ticket, is definitely disproportional compared to $1 million I received, right? So these are also unearned income. Now here I would encourage you to think about, for a government, what is earned income, what is unearned income, okay? Specific examples, right? And then during our class discussion, class meeting, we're going to discuss these, okay? And of course, we would say that, if the government makes more money or collects more tax revenues from the earned income, then it's more likely for it to become a developmental state. Okay. Now, there are two characteristics about the earned income. Okay. So this would help us better or have a deeper understanding of the earned income for a government. Okay. Now, the first characteristic is reciprocity between citizens and state. In other words, the state or the policymakers or the ruling elite needs to, when they make the policies should benefit the general public, okay, instead of the ruling elite themselves, right? As a return, the citizens would keep the ruling elite in power, right? So again, every 4 years, our presidential election would be a good example, right? We would look back and see in the past 4 years, did the president do a good job or not? If he or she does a good job, then we would re-elect him or her, and they would stay in office, right? Otherwise, we would vote for someone else. Okay, so again, reciprocity means the practice of exchanging the like something with others, okay, for the mutual benefit. Okay? The second characteristic of earned income for a government is the government has to make organizational efforts. In other words, to be able to collect the earned income, the government has to build institutions or infrastructures to be able to do that. Okay? Again, here, the institutions could mean political or economic or social institutions. The same thing for the infrastructure. Okay, and again, here I would leave this for you guys to figure out, or to come up with some examples of the government's reciprocity and organizational efforts. Okay, what exactly they have done. Okay, you can think about the major government, or you can think about the American government, again as an example. Okay. All right. The third factor, which is also quite important, especially for developing countries, is the rising productivity of the agricultural sector. Okay, most of the time when people talk about economic development, or how a developing country becomes a developed one, they pay a lot of attention towards the manufacturing sector. Okay, they believe that the country has to become industrialized, and then it will become richer. Okay, if you think about that, or look at the developmental process like that, it's likely you're going to disregard the development of the agricultural sector, okay, which is actually super important. Now, for several reasons. Number one, the rising productivity in the agricultural sector would provide reliable and stable source of government revenues. As we already discussed before, the major government has done a lot, right, during the restoration, and almost everything they have done, they lead the fiscal resources to implement these policies, right? Where exactly they get these resources, right? And the agricultural sector is the one, again, at least at the early stage or in the mid 19th century. Okay, so they collect these fiscal resources from the agricultural sector and actually subsidize the industrial or manufacturing sector, right? So the reliable and stable source of government revenue becomes very important. Okay. The second one is they provide the source of foreign currency and or the export. Okay. Now, again, at the early stage of industrialization, a developing country leads import a lot of things, okay, machinery, equipment, and technologies. Okay. All of these, to make these investments or purchases, they lead the foreign currencies. Okay, so for example, at the early stage of the major restoration, they lead to buy these machinery equipments and even technologies, but they cannot use their own currency, right? They have to on a global market they have to use the American dollars, the U.S. dollars, or the British pounds. Okay, these major currencies back in 19th or early 20th century. Okay, now where exactly they get those foreign currencies? Okay, and that's from their agricultural sector exports. Okay, because remember at the early stage of industrialization, as we said before, their manufacturing goods were poorly made because they're still on the learning curve, right? So their manufacturing products were mainly made for their domestic market, not the global market. Okay. However, their agricultural products like rice and some other things, they actually relatively better, and that's where their comparative advantage is. So they can export and make the foreign currencies so that they would be able to purchase other things they need for industrialization. Okay. And agricultural sector matters also because it's the source of the industrial investment, as we just mentioned. Okay, so these two, the number two and number three, are actually intertwined. Okay, so if they want to buy more machinery equipment and even technologies, of course, the agricultural sector provides these fiscal resources to do that. Okay, and the last one, which is also super important, is because of the rising productivity of the agricultural sector, it did not lead as much labor as it used to be, okay, or used to lead. So a lot of farmers becomes available, okay, so they go to the urban areas and find the jobs in the factories. That provides a large source of labor force for Japan or any other developing countries to become developed, become industrialized. Okay. All right. So here we already discussed three factors. In the next video, we're gonna talk about the other three factors. All right.